Part 1. The boy on the boat. The sea was more than a home to Ryan. It was a story, whispered each morning through the wind and written each night in the stars. In the quiet coastal village of Nareth's Hollow, where gulls wheeled endlessly overhead and the dock creaked like an old man's laugh, Ryan and his grandfather Marlowe lived aboard the Wave Whisper, a fishing boat that had seen more dawns than many of the villagers' homes. The boat was small but sturdy, painted a faded blue with its name etched in silver script along the side. To some it was just a vessel, but to Ryan it was a cradle of memory, a beating heart, and the only place he'd ever called home. Ryan had lived with Marlowe since he was a toddler. His parents, both fishermen, had been lost at sea during a storm, one of those sudden, furious tempests that tore through the coastline with teeth and vanished just as quickly. No bodies were ever found, only fragments of their boat returned like apologies by the tide. Marlowe, hardened by a lifetime on the water, but softened by love for the boy, raised Ryan with hands tough from rope and a voice always laced with lullabies of the deep. Every morning before the sun lit the waves in gold, Marlowe would rouse Ryan with a low whistle and a warm hand on the shoulder. They would eat bread, sometimes fish stew left from the night before, and prepare the nets in silence. There was no need for words. This was their rhythm. As the tide breathed in and out, so did their life aboard the Wave Whisper. Out at sea, Ryan learned more than just how to fish. Marlowe taught him to read the clouds, to smell ships in the wind, to follow the stars like breadcrumbs through the dark. He learned that kindness mattered, even to the ocean. "The sea remembers, boy," Marlowe would often say. "Treat her well, and she may treat you the same." Still, as much as Ryan loved the sea, he dreamed of what lay beyond the horizon. While Marlowe saw the ocean as a source of life and labor, Ryan saw it as a vast canvas, painted with the stories of creatures and currents no one had ever truly known. He had heard tales from passing sailors of sea serpents longer than ships, of merfolk who wept pearls, and whales that sang lullabies to the moon. To Marlowe, these were stories to pass time. To Ryan, they were promises. On this particular morning, the sky was bruised with pink and orange as the Wave Whisper glided from the dock. The gulls circled lazily, and the air was warm with salt and sunlight. Ryan stood near the prow, hair tousled by the breeze, eyes scanning the waters with curiosity more than caution. "Wind's different today," Marlowe muttered as he adjusted the mainsail. "Tide's deeper, heavier." Ryan nodded but said nothing. He felt it too. There was a stillness to the water, not the peaceful kind, but the watchful kind, like the ocean was holding its breath. As they reached their usual spot near the coral shelf, Ryan began dropping the nets. But then he paused. A sound drifted up through the hole. It wasn't the moan of a whale or the creak of wood. It was music, soft and low, humming through the water like a lullaby too old for words. It was both beautiful and unbearably sad. It wrapped around him like sea mist, culling behind his ears, settling in his chest. "Grandpa," he whispered, "do you hear that?" Marlowe looked up, brow furrowed. "Hear what?" "The song," Ryan said, "underneath us. Like someone's humming." Marlowe's hands froze. "Pull the net back up." Ryan obeyed, confused. As the net surfaced, it overflowed with fish, silver-scaled and gleaming, more than they'd caught in weeks. Yet Marlowe's face darkened. "Too easy," he murmured. "The sea don't give without wanting something back." That night, they stayed docked. Marlowe paced the deck long after supper, chewing the inside of his cheek, staring at the horizon with eyes that no longer saw just waves. Ryan watched him, then looked down at the water and whispered to it, "Who are you?" No answer came, but somewhere beneath the surface, something shifted. Ryan didn't sleep well. His dreams were strange, filled with endless blue, drifting coral gardens, and a giant eye blinking slowly from the dark. Not a monstrous eye, but a tired one. Watching. Waiting. In the morning, as they set sail again, the ocean seemed different. The waves rose a little higher. The wind carried a hush. And as Ryan leaned over the side of the boat, he saw, just for a moment, a shadow slide beneath the hull, vast and smooth, like the back of something long asleep. He said nothing. He only smiled. The sea, he thought, is starting to speak. Part 2. Songs in the Deep. The sea held its breath. Ryan felt it the moment the boat left the harbor the next morning. There were no gulls calling, no playful breezes dancing between the sails. The water was smooth, too smooth, and the sky, cloudless and white, seemed to press down like a lid. Even the boat's old wood creaked less, as if it too were holding still to listen. Marlowe noticed, of course. He'd spent a lifetime reading the sea like scripture, and today the verses were unfamiliar. "Something's wrong," he muttered, adjusting the rudder with a grunt. "Feels like the sea's waiting on something." Ryan nodded but said nothing. He was still thinking about the song. The one he'd heard 2 days ago, echoing from the depths. The one that followed him into dreams. He tried to describe it to Marlowe, soft and mournful, like a lullaby sung to an empty cradle, but his grandfather only shook his head and muttered about too much salt air. They reached the shelf by mid-morning. It was a place they knew well, a shallow basin filled with coral and sea grass where fish darted like silver coins. Ryan dropped the nets and peered over the edge. The water shimmered with light and secrets. Then he heard it. That song. Again. It rose from below, slow and steady. It wasn't made of words, but it spoke to something old inside him. A longing. A sadness too vast to measure. Ryan closed his eyes, letting it fill him. The boat rocked gently beneath his feet, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. He opened his eyes just in time to see a shadow slip beneath the boat. Large. Fluid. Graceful. "Grandpa!" he shouted. Marlowe was already there, peering over the other side. He'd seen it too. "It's not a whale," he said. "Too smooth. Too aware." The nets came back empty. The fish, it seemed, had fled. That night, they returned to harbor in silence. Marlowe retired early, claiming an aching shoulder, but Ryan couldn't sleep. He sat alone on the deck, watching the moonlight play across the waves. Then, without thinking, he leaned over the edge of the boat and whispered into the water. "Who are you?" The sea didn't answer, but it did stir. A ripple crossed the surface, gentle and purposeful. Ryan felt the vibration in his fingers as they rested on the railing. "I'm not afraid," he said. "Are you?" No reply. Just silence. That night, his dreams deepened. He stood on the ocean floor, barefoot on white sand, surrounded by forests of glowing kelp and ruins of stone towers. Fish with lantern eyes swam in spirals overhead. And from behind a great coral arch, a figure approached. It was enormous. Larger than a ship, yet moving with the grace of drifting seaweed. Covered in moss, barnacles, and pearls. Its face was not monstrous, but ancient, like a story too long forgotten. 2 eyes, deeper than trenches, blinked slowly and locked onto him. A voice, not heard but felt, filled his chest. "You called." Ryan woke with a start, heart racing. The boat rocked gently in the harbor. Marlowe snored below deck. The next morning, the silence was gone. The wind had returned, playful and brisk. Gulls called once more, and the village stirred with familiar sounds. But Ryan's mind wasn't on the day's work. It was on the creature, the presence, that had visited his dream. He could still feel its gaze, not threatening, but searching. They set out as usual, but Ryan's attention never left the water. His eyes scanned every wave, his ears tuned to every ripple. Just past midday, it happened. The sea rose. Not in a wave, but in a slow, massive swell. Something beneath them moved. The wave whisper tilted slightly, groaning under its own weight. Marlowe grabbed the rail, his face pale. "Ryan, brace yourself." The water foamed, and then, without a splash or roar, the creature surfaced. It was beautiful. It rose from the deep like an island being born. Towering, scaled in hues of emerald and slate, draped in coral like a crown. Its eyes, huge and mournful, fixed on Ryan. Around its head, smaller fish swam like loyal attendants. It did not roar. It did not attack. It simply watched. Ryan stepped to the edge of the boat, ignoring his grandfather's warning grip on his arm. He met the creature's gaze and whispered, "Breinhot?" The creature blinked once, slowly. Marlowe's voice cracked. "What in all the deep blue is that?" "I think," Ryan said softly, "it's lonely." Breinhot lingered for a long moment, then slowly dipped beneath the surface again, vanishing without a trace. But not without leaving something behind. Ryan found, nestled at the bow of their boat, a single pearl, iridescent and warm to the touch. And though the sea resumed its rhythm, the boy knew nothing would ever be the same again. Because the sea had answered, and it remembered his name. Part 3. The Breinhot Awakens the Sea Remembered. And each morning after their encounter with Breinhot, it remembered a little more. Ryan woke with the memory of that vast, sorrowful eye carved into his dreams. The pearl left on the boat now sat beside his cot, nestled in cloth. It pulsed faintly, as though it contained the beat of a distant heart. Marlowe had said little since they'd returned. He busied himself with the sails, the nets, the weather. But Ryan knew the silence wasn't from disbelief, it was from fear. Still, they returned to the sea. Day after day, the wave whisper slid through the water, and though they caught fewer fish, Ryan sensed something far more valuable beneath them. The ocean had changed. It wasn't just alive, it was listening. Breinhot began to appear more often. Not always close. Sometimes just a shadow slipping beneath the keel, a ripple too large to be from any wave. Other times, he surfaced in full, towering, ancient, and impossibly gentle. He never made a sound, never moved to frighten. He simply came, and Ryan began to speak to him. At first, he whispered into the wind, unsure if the creature could hear him. He told stories about life on the boat, the dreams he had, the parents he missed. He described flavors, salted herring and cinnamon rolls, and colors, like the gold of morning sun on Marlowe's hair or the silver shimmer of sardines in a net. Breinhot listened, and in return, he gave Ryan dreams. They weren't dreams like before. They were clear, vivid, like stepping into a memory. Ryan found himself walking through sunken ruins glowing with bioluminescent coral, where statues of forgotten kings wept pearls into the sea. He soared beside ghost whales who sang in low, echoing tones. He glimpsed fragments of Breinhot's past, crowds of people on golden shores throwing garlands into the surf, children laughing and calling his name. Once, Ryan asked aloud, "Why are you sad?" That night, the dream showed Breinhot alone in the ocean, watching ships sail past without slowing. He curled in sea caves, untouched by light as coral grew over his back. The song returned, low, aching. "I'm sorry," Ryan whispered when he woke. "You were loved once." He began bringing Breinhot offerings, baskets of fresh fish, sea-polished stones, a carved wooden gull. The creature always accepted them in silence, lifting them gently in coils of kelp and tucking them into the sea. Marlowe finally spoke one morning as they prepared the nets. "This isn't just a creature," he said without looking at Ryan. "It's something else." Ryan nodded. "He's called Breinhot. He's lonely." Marlowe exhaled slowly, gaze fixed on the horizon. "That name, I've heard it before. In lullabies. In stories my grandfather told when he was half drunk and full of ghosts. Do you believe them now? I believe we're not the first to forget what we should have remembered." That afternoon, Ryan brought out his father's old whistle, a simple thing carved from bone and tied with faded string. He didn't know what made him do it, but as the sun dipped low, he played a tune. It wasn't perfect. The notes wavered, but the melody was gentle, hopeful. Breinhot surfaced beside the boat, closer than ever before. His eye, as large as a sail, met Ryan's. The whistle's last note echoed, and Breinhot bowed. Ryan laughed, joy bubbling from him like foam on a rising tide. "You liked that, didn't you?" And Breinhot did something he had never done before. He exhaled. The sound was like wind through a canyon, deep and reverent. It washed over the wave whisper and carried with it the scent of coral reefs and ancient storms. The ocean rippled with it, not in fear, but in reverence. That night, Marlowe joined Ryan on deck. "I've seen storms part for nothing," the old man said, "but he listens to you." Ryan shrugged. "I think he just needed someone to talk to." "You sure he doesn't want more?" Ryan turned the pearl in his hand. "I think he wants to be remembered." Marlowe stared at the water. "Then we remember him." They spent the next day making something special. Marlowe pulled down an old sail, and Ryan painted it with sea blue ink. Together, they drew Breinhot, not as a monster, but as a guardian. Above him, Ryan wrote in bold letters, "We see you. We remember." That evening, they raised the sail. And when Breinhot emerged from the deep and saw it, he did not vanish. He stayed until the stars rose and the tide changed. And somewhere deep below, a song turned hopeful once again. Part 4. The storm of nets and knives. The news spread like fire on wind-dried sails. A sea monster. He tightened beneath the waves. Some said it sang. Others said it had hypnotized the boy and his old man. But every telling agreed on one point. There was a creature in the water, and it was real. Ryan had expected wonder. Instead, there was fear. It began with the merchant ship that spotted Breinhart's silhouette just beyond the kelp shelf. The captain returned to shore pale-faced, muttering of an island with eyes. By week's end, fishermen who once greeted Ryan with smiles now crossed the street when he passed. Marlowe warned him gently that people fear what they don't understand. But fear soon became greed. A royal decree was issued from the mainland. A bounty, gold enough to buy a fleet, for the capture or proof of the beast. Rumors said the creature's bones could power kingdoms, its eyes ground into potions of foresight. Ships came bearing harpoons, chain nets, fire barrels. Men with cold eyes and colder hearts. Ryan begged Marlowe to stay away from the water, but his grandfather knew better. "If we don't protect him, who will?" Breinhot no longer approached the boat openly. He watched from afar, his massive body lurking just beneath the waves. The joy in his eye had faded, replaced by caution, then sorrow. Ryan called to him each morning, but the water remained still. Not from abandonment, but from fear. Then came the night the ships attacked. It was moonless, the sky veiled with clouds. Ryan couldn't sleep, his dreams were sharp, full of nets and smoke. He climbed onto the deck and saw torches in the distance. A fleet, silent, spread like a fan across the bay. "They've come," Marlowe said from behind him, gripping the tiller. "And they'll tear apart the sea to catch him." Ryan didn't hesitate. "We have to warn him." They raised the sail. The wave whisper sliced through black water like a prayer. Ryan clutched the whistle around his neck and played the tune Breinhot loved. Once, twice, 3 times. A swell rose ahead of them. The sea churned. Then, from the deep, Breinhot breached. He was not alone. The hunting ships were already surrounding him, dropping nets laced with toxins that shimmered green. Harpoons pierced the air. One struck Breinhart's side, and he let out a cry, a sound like thunder breaking inside a hollow cave. "No!" Ryan shouted, leaning over the rail. He saw Breinhot trying not to fight, trying not to hurt. He spun, tail sweeping, avoiding the boats, but they swarmed like hornets. Another spear, this one to the shoulder. Blood, dark and slow, painted the water. "Head to the reef," Marlowe cried. The old caves. The wave whisper pulled alongside Breinhot. Ryan leaned out, holding the whistle high. "Follow us. Trust me." Breinhot turned his great head, and for a breath, everything stilled. Then he dove. They led him through a passage only locals knew, between rock fingers too narrow for the big ships. Behind them, furious shouts echoed as the hunters lost sight of their prey. They reached the hidden cove just before dawn. It was a sacred place, known only to a few. Lush with mangroves, protected by tide-carved cliffs. Breinhot collapsed in the shallows, his body half submerged, breaths heavy. The wounds oozed, steaming. Ryan jumped into the knee-deep surf and ran to him. "You'll be okay. I've got you." He laid his hand on the scarred hide. Brinehart's I blinked slowly. He was trying to sing, but no sound came. Ryan turned to Marlowe, tears spilling freely. It's not enough. I don't know how to help him. Marlowe stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Ryan's shoulder. Then we find something that can. That night, as Brineheart rested, Ryan built a fire. He sat beside the creature, singing every lullaby he knew. He pressed the glowing pearl to the wounds, hoping the sea would hear. And in the dark, he whispered a promise. I'll go to the deep hollow. I'll find what you need. Brineheart stirred. His eye opened, wider now, focused. And Ryan understood. There was a way. The heart coral, told in sailors' tales as myth, was said to lie in the hollow's trench, guarded by ancient currents and creatures of memory. It healed what nothing else could. And it was there, waiting. Marlowe didn't argue. He helped Ryan prepare. You've got more heart than half the world's kings, he said as he handed Ryan his old compass. But don't lose it in the dark. The next morning, as Brineheart slept and the village whispered and the hunters regrouped, Ryan stood on the edge of the reef, diving gear strapped to his back. I'll come back, he said. And then he jumped. Into the deep. Into legend. Part 5. The heart of the deep. The sea swallowed him whole. Ryan dove deeper than he had ever dared before. The light of the cove faded quickly behind him, swallowed by a veil of dark blue that thickened to ink. The pressure hugged his chest like a warning, but he didn't turn back. He had to reach the deep hollow. Had to find the heart coral. He followed the current south, using Marlowe's compass lashed to his wrist, its needle trembling with each shift of the tide. Strange fish shimmered past him, transparent things with blinking lights and wide, mournful eyes. Echoes pulsed through the water, some distant, some terribly near. Still, he swam. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time bent strangely in the dark. The trench opened beneath him like a wound. A vertical abyss that seemed to reach down forever. Ryan paused at its edge, heart thudding like a drum. He drew a deep breath through the breathing shell strapped to his chest, a gift from the sea folk of the northern reefs, given to Marlowe in a tale too long to repeat, and descended. The water grew colder. He passed glowing fungi on rock faces, skeletal coral gardens, and shadows that moved without source. He whispered Brinehart's name over and over to keep himself steady. Then the visions began. At first, they were flashes, his parents' faces, smiling, reaching for him from the dark. He saw the wave whisper, torn in half by phantom winds. Marlowe drowning. Brineheart sinking beneath chains. He knew they weren't real, but they felt real. He reached out, and the vision of his mother dissolved like foam. Fear is the gatekeeper, Ryan whispered to himself, voice muffled by bubbles. Deeper still, a sudden light. Soft, pulse-like, the heart coral. It grew at the very bottom, clinging to a ledge that jutted from the cliff face. The coral wasn't a single piece, but a living bloom, petals of pale rose and amber, pulsing with bioluminescence. It lit the trench like a heartbeat, and guarding it was a serpent. Long as a ship, scaled in pearl and jet, it coiled lazily around the rock. Its eyes opened slowly as Ryan approached, and it let out a soundless hiss, one that rippled through the marrow. Ryan didn't flinch. He floated before the guardian and bowed, palms open. I need it, he said, for someone the sea forgot. But I didn't. The serpent didn't strike. Instead, it studied him, coiled tighter. Then it spoke. Not with words, but with memory. Ryan was pulled into a swirl of images. Brineheart in ages past, swimming alongside fleets of old, guiding storm-tossed vessels to shore. He saw children casting wreaths into the water, elders whispering his name in prayer. Then came the forgetting. The ships grew greedy. They hunted. Brineheart fled. Time passed. Memory faded. And still, he waited. The serpent released its grip. Ryan reached forward. His hand brushed the heart coral. A jolt. Not pain, but understanding. Images of kindness surged through him. His laughter with Marlowe, his songs to Brineheart, the day he gave up a full net to rescue a tangled dolphin. The coral responded. A piece of it detached willingly, cradled in a glow. Ryan took it, clutched it to his chest, whispered thanks. Then he swam. The trench tried to hold him. Visions flared again. Brine hot, bleeding. The village on fire. But Ryan focused on the real, on the pull of the tide, the thrum of the coral, the promise he had made. Upward, kicking hard, muscles burning. The water lightened. And then, surface. He gasped, breaking through the waves with a cry. The cove was still. Brinehot lay near the mangroves, his breathing shallow, eyes dim. Marlowe rushed forward as Ryan dragged himself ashore, coral clutched tight. "I have it," Ryan panted. "Hold him steady." He pressed the coral to Brinehart's wound. The glow expanded, humming. The coral dissolved like light into the creature's skin. Silence. Then, a shudder. A breath. A note. Brinehot exhaled, and the note became a song. Not sorrowful, not mournful, but bright, full of wind and joy and gratitude. The water around him glittered. Fish returned. The kelp danced. The pearl on Ryan's wrist pulsed one last time, and then went still. Brinehot opened his eyes. He spoke, not with words, but with voice, with music. "You remembered me." Ryan nodded, falling to his knees. "You remembered me first." The boy and the beast sat beneath the rising sun. Two hearts, once distant, now bound. And above them, the sky bloomed with color, like even the heavens were glad he had returned. Part 6. The voyage beyond the sea was calm. Not the fragile stillness before a storm, but a genuine hush, like the ocean itself was holding a breath of awe. Brinehot had been healed. His massive form drifted in the moonlit cove, glowing faintly with the residual magic of the heart coral. Where once he had been mottled with scars and weighed down by centuries of sorrow, now he seemed reborn, sleek, strong, and shimmering with color. The sea around him was vibrant again, teeming with fish, the coral blooming, the kelp dancing like it remembered its song. Ryan sat on the deck of the Wave Whisper, legs swinging over the edge, a blanket draped over his shoulders. His hair was still damp from the dive, his muscles sore, but his heart had never felt more whole. Marlowe leaned beside him, sipping hot kelp tea and gazing out at the quiet miracle before them. "You did it," Marlowe said softly. "You brought him back." Ryan shook his head. "He found me first. I just listened. The hunters never returned. Some claimed their ships were led astray by fog. Others said their harpoons rusted in their hands. A few, it was whispered, had seen Brinehot after the healing, had heard his song, and laid down their weapons. One even left a spear on the shoreline with a shell tied to its tip, a gesture of apology. The village, too, changed. At first, cautiously. Fishermen returned to the bay and found their nets full again. Children saw dolphins leap alongside their boats. The old began to speak of Brinehot not as a legend, but as a neighbor. And when the tide was right, the villagers would leave wreaths of seaweed and flowers by the dock, a gesture of remembrance. Marlowe and Ryan rebuilt the boat, reinforced it with new planks gifted by the villagers. But Ryan didn't intend to stay long. The sea was calling. Brinehot had shown him things, ruins yet to be explored, currents that whispered old songs, other guardians waiting to be found and remembered. Ryan could no longer be only a fisherman. He was something else now, a keeper of stories, a bridge between worlds. One morning, as the sun rose like fire over the water, Ryan stood beside Marlowe, sail raised, compass in hand. "You sure about this?" Marlowe asked, his voice thick. Ryan nodded. "There's more out there. More to listen to. More to remember." Brinehot surfaced, gliding alongside the boat like a shadow-given form. Ryan reached out and touched his brow, and in that moment, he felt it, a silent promise. Wherever the sea took him, Brinehot would be near. Marlowe placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just don't forget where you started." "I won't," Ryan said. "I'll tell everyone." And so, the wave whisper turned toward the horizon, brine hot beside it. Together, boy and beast sailed into the unknown, not to conquer, not to escape, but to listen, to heal, to pass on what had nearly been lost. And in the stillness after they vanished into the morning mist, the villagers swore they heard a song, not of sorrow, but of wonder. A lullaby of the deep. Of a boy who loved a sea monster. And of a sea monster who learned to trust again.